Alright, kings, gentlemen, everyone else, welcome to yet another exciting episode of Looming Rain. It looks like it's gonna rain, so let's just get this over with and get back home. So anyways, we have a new pope, Habemas Papam, and well, it doesn't really change much for me because I'm Orthodox and our church is still a bunch of faithless criminals. But a lot of American Protestants are up in arms about the new pope, specifically a lot of the MAGA types. The MAGA types are, of course, mostly Protestant. They've been making inroads with some Catholic populations, especially the Latinx and all of that. And thanks to the efforts of one Raymond Cardinal Burke, a repressed homosexual if there ever was one, and an absolute peacock of fashion, there more and more American Catholics are voting for MAGA, even though they're traditionally a Democrat constituency, especially the Irish. And however, for the time being, MAGA remains primarily Protestant and very specifically evangelical movement. So it's not even your box standard Protestants. No, these are like a very special type of Protestant. So, I mean, I don't really get into what a man believes in. That's between him and God. But it's very interesting to me that someone who is Protestant would be so interested in who the Pope is. I mean, it's supposed to be, just fucking Rome, right? Roman Catholics. Why do we care? We protested against them. We're rid of these people, and but it is important because at the heart of MAGA, like the newest addition to the coalition and the most powerful part of the MAGA coalition, is neo-reaction. And the central thesis of neo-reaction is that modern American leftism is actually genealogically descended from Protestant Christianity. Now, you can go and read all the bullshit about how, it's actually descended from Protestantism, it's actually Puritan Calvinism at work. That's what American leftism is, which also is, I don't consider this to be 100% false, but it stands to reason that a lot of these people would therefore consider any form of Protestant faith to be suspect at best, and a lot of the neo-reactionary types, they advocate Catholic integralism. Now, the neo-reactionary types themselves are rarely Christian at all. They tend to be, of a certain troublesome sect, which we can't seem to shake for the past 2,000 years. But they are, let's just say they're not Christian. And they're not Muslim either. You have this sort of interest in the Catholic Church because these people need Catholicism to be a sort of based and traditionalist alternative to Protestant Christianity. And so you have J.D. Vance converting to Catholicism and then immediately starting to lecture people who have been Catholic their entire lives about what Catholicism really means by, getting together with his friends and preaching integralism. Integralism being this idea that the church and the state should get together and this should abrogate the American Constitution because, the state should determine what virtue is. You don't get to self-select your virtue in life. The state will tell you that and be guided by the wisdom of the church. Now, that's not a very American attitude, and people are, very rightfully up in arms about the very mention of it, so it has to be kept a little bit under the covers. But it also is invested in this attitude of the Catholic Church as a traditionalist and conservative, emphasis on conservative alternative to modern liberalism. And since these people are not intellectuals, they're not scholars, right, they need the Catholic Church to be specifically in favor of American conservatism, and specifically the type of conservatarianism, as it's called, that has been proliferating ever since the Ron Paul Revolution, where essentially you are a conservative, but your conservatism primarily consists of worshiping corporations and hating government regulation of business of any kind. So essentially, if the government wants to stop food producers from filling animals full of steroids or filling bread full of sawdust, well, that's literally socialism, and it will lead to the gulags. That's really the attitude we're dealing with here. In practice, these people are very little but running dogs for the coming American cacistocracy. And of course, the ultimate goal of neo-reaction is sort of like self-aware, ascended conservatarianism, where they're saying, you know what, we should totally be doing the techno-feudalism thing. We should totally escalate neoliberalism to feudalism because, well, why the fuck not? That would be the freedom-y thing to do. And in fact, freedom is really just for this very small select group of Catholics. Small group of capitalists. And everyone else should be a slave because, hey, that's their natural position in life. It's very disgusting when you put it like that. It is probably one of the most revolting ideologies conceived of on the planet, but it is what it is, I guess. And that's what's at the heart of the US government right now. Now, how does this tie into Catholicism? And why does it bother them so much that the Pope disagrees with them like this, with this ideology, and has specifically named J.D. Vance as a, well, I guess you could call him a false Catholic, although the church doesn't really believe in false Catholicism. I mean, it can declare you a heretic, but it doesn't really matter. Let's not get into church theology here. The problem with this is that Catholicism actually does have quite a few opinions on on how we should run our society and how we should run the economy in particular. Yeah, it's gonna rain. It's kind of hard to catch my breath because of the low pressure front, but anyways, it's the church already has some pretty substantial opinions on how society and the economy should be run. It came up with them in the late 19th century, and it was actually Leo XIII, the Pope Leo XIII, who came up with papal encyclical. I think they called it the Rerum Novarum. My Latin is very rusty. I haven't used it for the past 1600 years, ever since the empire fell, so please bear with me. But it is what has come to be known as Catholic social teaching. And get this, it does not really get on board with endless capitalism. It provides a defense for private property, but it addresses the complaints of the socialists, of the syndicalists, of everyone else, and says, you know what, we should drop the class conflict because, well, it's destructive and pointless. And towards that end, the state, guided by the wisdom of the church, should find a way to smooth out the differences. So address the complaints of the working class, which means provide worker protection. And of course, consumers should be protected. So you should have consumer protection. And while we're at it, the world is God's garden, and we are tasked with stewarding it, so why not have some environmental protection as well? In essence, what the church recommended was to put checks and balances on the free market system and on the capitalist class to prevent them from exploiting the poor, the consumers, and the environment. Now, if you secularize that, what you get is essentially the doctrine of either American progressivism or some other ideologies we're not going to discuss here. It's not a socialist doctrine. It's actually criticized among socialists as a sort of a bourgeois delaying tactic, but I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that, and I actually think that the church's advice is pretty solid. You know what? Let's safeguard private property for everyone, not just the rich. Let's have a free market. But because free markets are actually pretty good at innovation, at getting capital where it needs to be. However, we do not exist as a society to serve capital, so let's put these checks on it. Let's put these balances on it, and who better to do it but the state, which in the Catholic interpretation is best guided by the wisdom of the church. Now, not controlled by the church, guided by the wisdom of the church, which I could live with that. I could live with that, even though myself, I am not super Christian. I do live my life according to Christian morality. We all do, whether we like to admit it or not. Because, well, yeah, Christian morality just works for large and complex societies. And And it is no accident. Actually, the new Pope, Pope Leo XIV, has cited his predecessor, Leo XIII, as an inspiration, and the Rerum the new Catholic social doctrine, the papal encyclical by Leo XIII, as a reason for choosing his regnal name. It is a signal by the Church that no, we're actually not on board with kakistocratic kleptocracy, with rich people getting to do whatever the fuck they want, with large capital busting out small businesses and trampling over worker rights and consumer protection and environmental protection. It is a signal by the Church that we're actually going to hold to what is actual Catholic tradition, which is trying to find a balance between rich and poor, between working class and capitalist class, and assume our position as giving moral guidance to secular authority instead of just integrating with the secular states, and the way these American Catholic integralists would like to do. And that is very concerning to the neo-reactionary portion of MAGA, because, well, their thing is always about rejecting Protestantism, but now you have the OG rejectors of Protestantism, the people who remained Catholic after the Reformation. Well, they're the one rejecting them. As some person pointed out, like, the worst, J.D. Vance is probably living the worst religious experience of anyone could. You convert to a religion very late in life, by the way, and then you are specifically denounced by two different religions of that, leaders of that religion. So that's why MAGA is so concerned about Catholicism, because they want Catholicism to be something which Catholicism isn't. They want the Church to be a social institution which is ancient and traditional and stands for their particular brand of insanity. But the Church, being ancient and traditional, is a lot wiser than that. And I say that as a non-Catholic who has a lot of criticism for the Catholic Church. But by God, they know how not to walk into these rakes. Anyways, I think that's enough of me, and stay awesome, people. Bye-bye.